diabetes, heart disease, cancer, things like Alzheimer's.
We've got to ask ourselves what we need to do to make that happen. And that's what this entire program was designed to do, to become the most healthy and most exuberant, most vibrant that you can possibly be.
And then moving on to the third podcast, part 3, intestinal health. And again, we've touched on some of this stuff already too. But in intestinal health, we have we discussed that 70% of our immune system is in our intestinal tract. In our intestinal tract is where we absorb nutrients.
Yep.
And a big problem with the intestinal tract and why it gets bad is because of the rancid decay of food.
Absolutely.
And you mentioned that undigested protein rots into poison.
Right.
In the intestinal tract.
Yep.
Is there any more that you can give us on that?
Certainly, sure. And we'll go even further with that. The basic diet of the average American, the average person in this United States that we live in, is an acid-producing diet. Most of the foods we eat, sugar, protein, carbohydrates, is pretty much the most of them, have a in the way they're presented to us are acid causing, and by that I mean they either go in as acid. If you drink a Coca-Cola, for example, I can put a corroded penny inside of a Coca-Cola and have it shining in hours.
Sure.
Okay, so when you talk about, as a matter of fact, its acid is lower than 4. And when you get down into some of the hydrochloric acids and stuff like that, you get somewhere around 2.
And that's on a pH scale.
That's on a pH scale.
Where acid is the lower number.
Where water is
alcohol.
7. Water is 7. And the lower you go, the higher the acid, the hotter the acid. And I think a Coca-Cola is somewhere around 4. But at any rate, by the way, it takes 32 glasses of water to neutralize the acid in 1 glass of Coke.
Amazing.
All right. At any rate, so we eat essentially an acid-producing diet. It either goes in as acid or it has an acid ash. And what foods would we eat if we didn't want to do that? We would eat green leafy vegetables. We would eat lots of fruits. We would eat organic grown stuff that was raw. We would avoid cooked foods. We would avoid meats. We would avoid alcohol. We would avoid the kinds of things that create this acid byproduct within our systems that end up, here's the ticket, end up inside the intestines creating a mucus condition. The mucus attacks the acid to protect the tissues, the tender tissues inside the lining of the small intestine and the colon. It's attempting to prevent irritation to those tissues. Now, effectively what we've done is we've walled off the area that we're trying to depend on for nutrient absorption. We've also interfered with the digestive process because this mucus is pretty tough stuff. It's really tough. Biologically speaking, it takes a lot to get into that. That's why it's so protective. So what we've effectively done is we've taken and eaten a lot of meat, washed it down with a lot of acid foods, coffees, Cokes, sodas, whatever. Wash it down with that. Eat a lot of carbohydrates. That stuff goes into our system. The meat, which requires a couple of hours to digest, is in a hydrochloric acid solution in the stomach. Doesn't have a lot of time there because we've got a lot of sugar in there and a lot of carbohydrates along with it.
And that stuff pushes?
And it stimulates peristaltic action to mechanically move everything out of the stomach early and push it into the small intestine. The meat, which is usually the most contaminated food we eat, with pathological microorganisms, E. coli and whatever else is living in that stuff. That's typically the most toxic food that we put in our mouth is the meat we eat. Not only needs to sit in the stomach to digest in hydrochloric acid because that protein only breaks down in acid, but it needs to sterilize, and that's what hydrochloric acid does. Sterilizes that product. So sterilization and digestion is supposed to take place over a couple of hours with meat. So we throw a bunch of other stuff in there with it, and that says, no, excuse me, we've got to move this content. And so you end up with a lot of gurgling in your stomach, and everything moves on into the small intestine, where the meat begins to rot because it's no longer in an acid medium. It's now in an acid-free medium.
And it hasn't had time to fully digest, and it hasn't had time to fully get rid of all the toxins.
Sterilize. Right. So it's taken all the E. coli and everything else with it, moves it on into an alkaline medium where it begins to thoroughly rot. And I mean rot. Vultures eat rot. We don't eat rot. They eat rotten meat. We can't eat rotted meat. We're not designed for that. We don't have in our stomachs what they have. They can digest metal. I mean, we can't do that. So we end up putting all of that into the intestines, where the mucus then is secreted strongly to protect your cells from rotting, toxic poison full of microbiological contaminants that are toxic to the human being. So your body's doing what it can to protect you from what you've done. And what that does is it traps all those toxins, it traps that undigested poison, and it doesn't completely evacuate from the human system. And you're going to do it again tomorrow, if not 3 or 4 times that day, because this is your lifestyle. And you're going to continue to do that until over time, and not too much, but over time, you're going to impact all of that across your intestines, and you're going to interfere with the ability of the intestines to appropriately absorb nutrients from that mush of stew that's passing through you, where your intestines are designed to pull nutrients, where 70% of your immune system is at, looking to help you. It is now completely walled off and dealing with a toxic overload, where it's creating poisons that have an acid condition of their own, which are capable of eroding the lining of your intestines and creating holes into your bloodstream, where you now feed that toxic poison every day into your bloodstream. Not getting rid of it, but putting it right into your bloodstream, where it goes in, circulates, and goes to your brain, to your heart, to every tissue of your body. So you're poisoning yourself by your lifestyle and what it has created with regard to a rebellion on the part of your own digestive system.
Gotcha.
So that's where the intestinal health is so absolutely critical to keeping it intact and keeping it young and vital. Not only are you interfering with your ability to absorb nutrients, which then, by the way, go to create hormones and other things as well, but you're interfering with your immune system's ability to protect you, and then you're burdening it by poisoning it in the back door. It is a completely unacceptable situation for maintaining health. Mm-hmm. You can't maintain health.
And it sounds like you're basically creating a downward spiral of conditions.
Absolutely, and that will interfere with circadian rhythm, and it will interfere with the AMPK-mTOR process and its balance. You will, by creating a foul bowel condition, you will completely downregulate any attempt you might be putting into good health at any other level.
Wow. So that's the basis of everything is
foundation
is in our intestines.
That's absolutely correct.
Absolutely. Getting down to the cellular level, this is what our cells expect of us. This is what we need to give them. It's completely within our control to give our cells what they need. And in doing so, we're talking about completely eliminating diabetes, cancer, heart disease, Alzheimer's, and a myriad of other diseases.
But indeed, it truly is there. I mean, the DNA is the code. If anybody asks me what I consider health to be, can I define the quality of good health? Good health is the application of the DNA program. If we would obey the code written in our DNA, then our cells would perform according to that code. It's us that absconds with that code. We're the ones that mess it up. We're the ones that refuse to apply ourselves to what the cells ask of us. We get a sense then of ourselves as a whole human being, but then we also get the sense that we are no longer able to, with disregard, do anything that we care to do to ourselves. We now must take a look at what we require to generate that quality of health, that application of the proper DNA code.